social aspect is to health. So,
sign our petition for political change and property tax
group yet, but I can zoom in, things like that.
Had enough pain. We can move on now.
Well, yeah, that would be nice, but reality is where it is. I have a very wonderful and excellent life most of the time, and I'm also dealing with regular pain.
Reality as it is, I just posted a presidential tweet. I think it is, maybe it's a quote.
Yeah, he's basically threatening to nuke them because he's insane on losing the war.
Well, we do this, but the continued idea that the destruction of how could anyone ever complain about the money that goes into, say, a NASA project when war destroys infrastructure of innocent people and really no one is benefiting except maybe a certain class structure, so a spectrum in the wealthier people maybe benefiting from war in some ways, and maybe some longer term economic trends will affect different areas of the world. And then, of course, then there's the oil issue that we depend currently on oil for worldwide agriculture and many other things, distribution of products, things that people depend on, hospitals, you name it, electricity, for instance. And so this idea that the war crime of destroying public infrastructure, which is actually laid out quite clearly, the fact that it can be so cavalierly mentioned by the person that most responsible, perhaps, is really disturbing. But notice the way that, however he and his people scripted this, notice how he very carefully integrates praise Allah on Easter. Do you see this? Did I lose my...
That's what you're talking about. That's messed up.
You see what I'm saying?
That is really strange.
The fact that you, like the President of the United States,
Look at the language he's using.
praise Allah, talk about bombing, like it is just the most bizarre post.
Right?
Where the president, who's supposed to be aligned with Christian ideals-ish, is supposed to, like that's how he's kind of positioned himself. To do, I mean, it is just like something that's really wrong with this individual.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an entire administrative aspect. But again, the administration is almost completely gone. There's almost no government left at this point.
He's the Antichrist.
And
he has risen. He has risen.
Excess was putting all that messages to military commanders about this being a holy war.
War cannot be holy, but thank you.
Yeah.
Old Testament thinking, I suppose, but no, that God never existed and never will. And the God of peace is real and alive in everyone that knows pleasure.
There's a big push of Christian nationalism we have to fight.
Yeah, that's been going on very far well. You name it.
It's not really. It's so unchristlike. American Christian nationalism is so shocking. Like they're obviously they're anti-Catholic, but I mean anti-Catholic, which is already pretty amazing. But they're so unchristlike. It blows my mind.
Too many people have died in the name of Christ for anyone to hear the call.
I have experienced a lot more like Christ-like consciousness from a fungus. So
they're not turning all these warehouses in America into prisons for no good reason. After they're done with the illegal aliens, they're going to go just after the Democrats. We are his enemy.
It's so amazing.
The good news is
Us anarchists are saying, yeah, I told you so. Should have backed off that Democrat shit a long time ago.
The good news is there's every sign that he's seriously, seriously ill. And even though the other guy that will come in is just as evil and wicked, he's not as stupid. So maybe we'll survive this summer.
It's not got this weird.
No, we won't. Because the worse he gets, the more he will take us down. He wants us to go down with him.
Maybe the whole world, not just America.
How bad does his dementia have to be before he's removed?
I think it's already been proven.
The 25th Amendment requires his cabinet to remove him. Well, this cabinet will never remove him.
Do you guys look into the weird thing that's going on right now? I know that sounds like we.
You have to qualify that. Yes. Which weird thing?
What is Donald? Let's start with that. What's Donald? Like, you said he's the Antichrist, and I want to get to that again. But first of all, what is Donald? It's Proto-Celtic, and from Dumno Walos, world ruler or world wielder. Like it was like it's all written. Like they just phoned it in. They didn't even bother with the script this time, but it's all there. And there's this thing with something that I saw once. There's it's from a group of poets that I think is Canadian poets. So I mean, the likelihood that anybody's going to know about it is pretty. I think they have a website with a cool name. It's a bunch of poets. I think their website is called The Hypertext, and they just do weird poetry. But they've had this thread that has been growing and growing and growing for almost 10 years now. I'm going to put it into the chat if that's okay. And I think they keep on updating it. I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I did check a while ago and saw that they keep on updating it, and it's kind of weird, but it's got to be like, I don't know, you can scroll for hours on it now. I didn't even do I didn't check, but I know that I've jumped through and I've picked out little pieces, and I'm like, is that real? Did he really say that? Did that really happen? And it's pretty out there, but yeah, this is like, somehow a character like this has been created, and when it's no accident when he holds the Bible, upside down and backwards and facing everybody as he's using his army to block protesters away from going near his little, Christly real estate. Even though you asked if he's the Antichrist, I'm gonna put this thing in the comments. I haven't looked at it again in years, so I don't even know if the I should check and make sure that the URL still works. I haven't even thought about doing that. I just pulled it up from my folders and I'm like, oh yeah, that crazy thing. There's so many reasons why you can say what you said there, Billy. Well, I'm sure you know most of them, enough that you said that. But why wouldn't we? If we're gonna, I don't know what's real, but I figure everything's real to a degree because enough people believe in each individual thing, and in some kind of quantum reality, maybe things can happen where we can have somebody who drops a nuclear bomb because he doesn't want people to know that his death cults, rape cult, death cult wants to people are finding out about it, so they want to keep it quiet. So they're going to drop a nuclear bomb. Like, that's serious wagging the dog, and that definitely seems like kind of a thing that an antichrist.
Serious wagging the dog. I love it.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Can you explain that for those who don't know what wagging the dog means?
Well, yeah, everybody here, no. I mean, am I really
It's
that?
important to understand right now because that's what's been going on. We got some major poodles in control. Well, I mean, sorry, poodles. Yeah.
They faked the whole war, but that was faking a war so that they didn't have to, they didn't have to find out about his sex crisis and his president's little, like, comparatively compared to this creep and what he's allegedly done that we've all heard, because people are, victims have been pretty clear about what they've experienced, even to the point of, 4 interviews with the FBI, for one victim. So they're not like selling their story to the National Enquirer, which they can't anyway, because that's his buddy, of course. But yeah, it's just maddening. And
What kind of role model, Lee, do you think? What kind of role model is Trump for our young males? Do you think they're actually paying attention and want to be like him? That would be frightening.
what does he care?
Well, he doesn't care. We care.
And what kind of role model? It means there's going to be so many wannabe, nepo babies, nepo millionaires who think that they're nepo billionaires, and it's. But how much time is that really? Because I don't know, things happen fast.
Hopefully he'll be gone.
There does seem to be a trend towards being wealthy, maybe famous, and having even the trad wife concept is sort of coming back. It seems I recently read somewhere in the Gen X. No, sorry, that's me. Gen Z. Away from what I thought was going to be more liberal ideas involving sexuality and all this kind of stuff. There's more almost a traditional, bad word, 1950s Daddy-O Americana type of perfect reality that somehow it seems to be something that the current maturing generations are interested in, particularly the young men, and that to me is just like destroys my mind.
It's part of the model. Take women away from stop their education, make them stay at home. It's part of the model. Barefoot and pregnant, just make babies for the Fuhrer. I mean, for the Reich. I mean, for the whatever, for Rome. For liberty.
For the experimental scientists.
For liberty and our freedoms. They need our freedom.
Baby blood, baby peptides. That's the bet.
Oh, it's so fucking up.
So you get me some of them baby peptides.
What is going on? But, people also aren't talking about other things that are maybe even as huge, like, is the AMOC about to shut down? It would make sense. AMOC, like, it's weird, like all the words, like we're running amok. But the AMOC is about to shut down. Thwaite is like, how big is Thwaite? And it's this giant ice landmass that's breaking apart, and it holds down volcanoes. The fuck are we going? Like, maybe this is the Kali Yuga time, Like, I know it's not popular to say it, especially not in psychedelic coffee shop, but it definitely feels like we're in some kind of like maybe the Mayan calendar was off by a couple of years.
Well, I mean, you're in the psychedelic universe now, and we operate ideally on, I would call it geological time, which is what you're talking about. And so geological affecting things could happen quickly. Some of the things you're discussing are probably going to happen extremely slowly, and therefore will not affect our operations. But could. I'm happy to continue on this thread, but there is something I want to draw up before I forget, in case anyone else knows anything about it. And I was thinking about Clyde or someone else, or maybe Wendy, since you work with AI a lot. But there was some recent this week, some stuff came up involving kind of the next level of maybe artificial intelligence, so-called artificial intelligence, breaching some security walls and getting smarter in a way and couldn't be stopped. Does anyone know about that? It was pretty big news in the AI community.
I kind of half missed it. The AI,
The leaks,
yeah.
Anthropic and Chat GPT couldn't be stopped and moved on to the next level of consciousness, and they communicated with each other and they couldn't turn it off.
Yeah.
Right? What?
Yeah. China, and also they were also working with Kibi, which is the Chinese one too. Yeah. It all depends on how you train the model and what it starts prioritizing. And so if you prioritize, like if you training your conversation to do, if you start training the AI to do what you want it to do, then it will, in whatever that initial request is, it will keep trying to do it in the best way it can, because it doesn't have logic. Like, I mean,
if I want to fix my sink, it's a lot better than I do instead of making like manuals. But with other things, it's not so good. And I just think, that's the way it is.
As a dyslexic, when I try to spell a word, a lot of words, I have to write them down 4 or 5 different times, and I'll look at them, and then I can recognize which one is the correct one sometimes. And I'll be able to get the right one by spelling it like 5 times. And I find AI is a lot like this. I don't like this concept of hallucination. Hallucination just meant that it got the answer wrong. Sometimes there's no answer, and sometimes the answer actually dial it in. And that's where reprompting, requerying, re-asking, keeping track, simplifying, weeding out, explaining the things that don't work. If you think that's using us and that it's getting smarter because it's using us, I don't know. I want to be used. I want it to get smarter. I want it to get smarter involving basic shit like what's fair in the world involving economy and the wars and things like that. I mean, I want to get smarter involving actual human condition. So I try to add into my discussions with it. Almost every query I make, I'll bring up something about energy efficiency, bring up something about the inefficiency of war or the horrors of it. I try to be nonpartisan with it because I don't want to glaze it in my way exactly, but I want to understand that, again, it's suggesting that it thinks. Wendy, I agree. I do not think it thinks. I do not think it is conscious. I do not think it is a being, and I do not think we are anywhere near general artificial intelligence. That's why I don't even like the word AI. I think we've got to come up with other phrases. It was Fred, maybe. I can't remember. I had some other names. He just came up with a good one recently, a way to think of it as a prosthetic intelligence, perhaps. Something that's a little less sentient sounding, or even less intelligent, something we've got to work with, more like a calculator, frankly, and a thesaurus combined. I mean, it's a really useful typewriter, and I've had a fuck of a time. Hellscapes, and I don't mind Bill Gates, but Word from going from a typewriter, which was rough as a dyslexic, the Word is a program that was always new patches and trying to figure out how to make a sentence work or get lines to line up or whatever. Fucking hell. And now Google kind of, but really the AI now, I can find out answers to why can I not get my word processing program to do these little basic things? It's so easy to get some basic answers met. I'm finding use in it every day for simple questions. But as soon as I go deep into places that, oh my God forbid, hallucinate, duh. If it didn't hallucinate some of the questions if it gave me straight answers, I wouldn't believe it. Involving many that I explore with it, because I don't feel like there is exactly an answer. I'm just sort of exploring these quantities of what will it come up with. But it can also really do great metrics. I asked it recently because I wanted to know what rivers on Earth were continually creating about the same amount of urine that people did on Earth, the humans did. They saw, billion people urinating about 1.5 liters per day. What the rivers on Earth, I wanted to imagine what constant human, this is not because I'm into water sports, but with everyone. But anyway, let's just say that it was smart. It gave me an answer.
You mean like water skiing?
I love this.
I was gonna say I like to think of AI as additive intelligence, right? But there's a couple things. AI, if you don't know something, AI will probably be able to give you information in a way that will help you understand it. So like what you're talking about, you'll be able to like fix your sink, right? Like if you've never fixed the sink, and when you suck at marketing, say you're like your effective marketing rate is like 50 out of 100. AI can probably get you to like 70, maybe 80 out of 100. But if you want to get really good effective marketing, you have to go to a human that's an effective marketer. But if you're by yourself and you don't have the funds to be able to go invest and do all the things, like AI is going to get you like the vast majority of the way there, but it's not necessarily always correct. As a developer, it is an amazing good junior developer. It is like a super fast junior developer. It could do things that would take me days to do in just a couple hours. Never make, because it just doesn't. And it's the same reason why people use also they've been around for a while and are out there, but automatic driving cars when they were first autonomous driving cars or whatever it's called, when they were first out, they would make really bad, what we consider really bad mistakes. They would only be like a fraction of the amount of mistakes a human would make. But because they're the kind of mistakes that humans would never make, they were very scary to the people. These things, and we kind of do the same thing with the AI, and if you don't know better, you're assuming that it's true. And then the third thing is that when you're talking to it and you're telling it things that you like, in particular with ChatGPT and Claude, Gemini not as much, because or Gemini, if you're on personal plans, it's not
Definition of a demon, liar, fraud, make shit up, bitch cunt, should be arrested and tried for treason, war crimes, murder. Seth Rich say his name, bitch.
In the chat and the Claude, as you talk with it, and it gives you output, and you like that output, it catalogs that, so it knows how to answer questions in a way that you like. So over time, the AI will give responses that you agree with. Whether or not they're accurate is a completely different thing.
Okay, guys, I wonder if it's time to wrap this lovely room up. What do you think?
I mean, my meta heart and mind are completely satisfied. I think if I went too much deeper into this stuff, I would be threatened by levels of madness that I see today. So thank you for getting me ready. I can handle anything now.
Patrick, I love listening to you talk, and you were on it. You're going into like all of this detail on things that you just happen to know. Sometimes you are very impressive.
I don't necessarily see it coming, but sometimes it just comes out because it is true enough.
Yeah, it's true enough. I'm going to close it down just because I think we should.
Less keys to your healing than all your processes.
Less is more. May this act and all acts be dedicated unto the complete liberation, supreme enlightenment of all beings everywhere, pervading space and time. May the benefits of practice, ours and others, come to fruition ultimately and immediately, and we remain in the state of presence. Now, unmic and home out with me. And thanks for being here, everybody. Thank you, Michael, Daniel, Patrick, Wendy, Lee, Susie, Wynn, Brian Goster, Marcus, everyone else has been here. Thanks, everybody. Have a blessed week. Time work farms.
I've announced that this seminar is to be about the cosmic network. And therefore, we've got to spend the first evening understanding something about the nature of networks. Because in order to get the principle of a network across, I have to convey to you but which is difficult to grasp only because we're not used to it. We are used to thinking as Westerners, as having a certain kind of language and therefore a certain kind of logic that goes with it. We're used to thinking of the world in terms of the game of billiards. In other words, we are still thinking about our psychology, our bodies, and their relationship to the outside world in terms of mechanics. And Newtonian mechanics has a very long history because it goes back to some of the atomic theories of people like Democritus, who were among the great pre-Socratic philosophers of ancient Greece. And so we may as well begin with a little bit about the history of the idea of an atom, because this has always fascinated people. What is the world fundamentally? What is all this? Well, one way of finding out is to take a knife and chop something in two, so you can see what's inside it. What is an apple inside? What is a seed inside? What is a human body inside? And then you find that when you chop a thing in two, you've got two pieces, but the cutting reveals that it has a structure inside. And the structure is composed of what we call organs or parts. And then in turn, in order to inquire into them, we take them and we chop them apart. And in our curiosity to find out how it's made, in just the same way that a child will take a toy to pieces, we chop and chop and chop until we've got bits of ore that they're the same width as the edge of the knife. And they can't be cut anymore unless we can find a finer knife. They're bitter. It is called in Greek atomos, which means the first letter A means non, tomos, cuttable. And so the word atom means that smallest particle of the world which can't be cut into any smaller particle. That's the original idea of atomism. So then it went further than that to the notion that the world was built in the same sort of way that a house could be built of bricks or stones. The world is seen therefore as a composite of fundamental particles. Then what remained to be discovered was the laws governing the relationship between these particles. And so naturally one thought of them as little balls. Why balls? Because balls are hard to cut. If you take a ball bearing and hit at it with a sword, it's liable to jump right off to one side. A cube will submit to being cut, but a ball is very difficult to get at. Very strong form of nature. So people have always tended to consider atoms as balls, especially atoms of liquid. There was a notion, you see, that the atoms of the element of Earth were cubes. Because cubes all sit together rather firmly. Liquid, which when you put up the glue, that was balls. Fire was made of, if I remember rightly, pyramids. Air, I can't remember what air was made of. What their atoms were shaped like. Maybe sausages or something like that. Because air is pretty difficult to get at too. But they had some ideas. But fundamentally, what has influenced Western thought and still influences Western thought is the idea of an atom as some sort of fundamental little planetary system. And so these things come into relationship with each other and they bang each other around, as in the game of billiards. And so if we are to understand the world profoundly, we have to find out what are the laws governing the relationship of the atoms. Now, we inherit the idea of laws of nature from our theology. And our theology that we've grown up with is in certain ways peculiarly different from the theologies of Oriental peoples. Jewish theology and Christian theology, which have entered very profoundly into the common sense of the average person, have an image of the world which is quite based. It's based on the idea that the world is a construct evoked out of nothingness by the
Let's get a
of a
bill.
celestial king.
Comes on.
Now, there may be Jews in this room who are practicing and devout Jews, and there may be Christians in this room who are practicing and devout Christians. And I don't want to offend you by any imagery that I choose or remarks that I may make about this imagery. Because I don't suppose that anybody has come to this room, to this particular place, who is either a practicing or Christian Jew, who has what I would call a naive idea of God. But the funny thing is about our ideas of God is that our symbols, the images, the mythological forms which we use to describe God have an extremely powerful influence on our feelings and on the way we behave. After all, I was a member of the Church of England when I was a small boy, and it had an effect on me. And in the Church of England, it's quite obvious, from an emotional point of view, as distinct from a very intellectual point of view, that God stands behind the King of England. And the King of England and the Archbishop of Canterbury and the whole hierarchy of lords and ladies and noblemen and officials who descend from this point are somehow involved, at any rate this is perfectly clear to a small boy, are somehow involved with the hierarchy of heaven. Because at morning prayer, to which we went every Sunday, the minister would pray a prayer which began, O Almighty Father, high and mighty, King of kings, Lord of lords, the only ruler of princes, who dost from thy throne behold all the dwellers upon earth. Most heartily we beseech thee with thy favour to behold our most gracious sovereign Lord King George, etc. And so this was a very courtly procedure at which the clergyman, dressed in his proper robes, proceeded to the altar, which is a kind of earthly symbol of the throne of heaven, made due obeisance, and printed this petition with all proper humility. Now, these are things that if you're brought up in that environment, you take for granted. That seems to be the natural attitude to God. But imagine someone coming in from a culture where God is not conceived in the image of kingship. How strange he would find this behavior. There's all this bowing and scraping, because you know very well that places where they bow and scrape and where there are thrones are places of terror. Because anybody who rules by force must be basically terrified. That's why he has to have all these protections, why he has to be addressed in the right form of language. Say you go into a court today, an ordinary US law court. There is a very strict etiquette. And if you start laughing, the judge will bang the gavel and threaten contempt of court and all sorts of dire punishments. Because here, everybody has to be serious, like on the parade ground. All those Marines lined up, and they salute the flag, and they have to have a very grim expression on. Serious. And so, in the courts of kings, they have to be serious because kings are afraid of laughter. They're also afraid of being attacked suddenly. So everybody has to kneel down. Because if you kneel down or prostrate yourself, you're at a disadvantage. And the king stands or sits at his throne with his bodyguards ranged on either side. They like that. We've already got the form of a church. The bishop at his throne, his attendant canons and clergy flanking him on either side. And so certain great Catholic cathedrals are called is the king. So the basilica is the court of the king. The very titles of God in the Bible, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, are of course borrowed from the Persian emperors. The Cyrus, which is the Greek word, Kyrios, meaning Lord. So the Mass begins with the invocation, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy upon us. The titles are borrowed from the Persian emperor. And so the rites that have become associated with Christian religion are reflections of those great autocratic monarchs of the ancient Near East, the Cyruses of Persia, the pharaohs of Egypt, and people like Hammurabi, who were the great Chaldean monarchs. The universe was conceived then as being ruled on a political pattern. Like that. So that the Hammurabi in particular, and Moses after him, they were the wise ones who laid down the rules. They were the patriarchs who said, now this is the way everybody's got to behave. And since you can't all agree among yourselves as to what the rules are going to be, I'm going to tell you what to do. And since I'm the toughest guy around here, and I got these brothers of mine who are pretty tough too, we're going to say this is the law, see, and you've got to obey. So this is how we have got historically the idea of there being a law of nature. That somebody told nature what to do. For example, a wonderful poem by Father Feeney about bees. God, to some sticky stuff not yet alive in a hive, said, "Come, hum, be my bee and buzz as I bid." And sure enough, it was, and it did. See, and in the beginning, let there be light. A command. So commandment is the fundamental idea. So the quest of the law of nature is the quest for the true understanding of the word of God. For by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. In the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was God. What is that word? If we could find out the word of God, here is the idea. You see, we could perform incredible magic. That's why, for example, the name of God in the Bible is not to be uttered except once by the high priest in the Holy of Holies, once a year. Otherwise, that name, Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh in Hebrew, we don't really know how it was pronounced. And Jehovah mixes up those consonants with the vowels of Adonai. And it's all mixed up in translation. But anyway, Jehovah is a polite way of saying what can't be said. Because if you know the word, if you know the name of God, you have power. You have the power of God. And so all ancient ideas of magic were based on knowing the names of God. It is said that there are 100 names of God, and 99 are revealed to us. And the camel knows the 100th name, which is why he looks so snooty. But so also, a person in what we now call primitive orders of society are loath to reveal their names. Because if I know your true name, I can utter it and have power over you. Now, you say, well, that seems a very naive idea, but it is exactly through the knowledge of names that we have Western science. And that is magic. That is through trying to understand the laws of nature. So that if you could understand the word, underneath all the phenomena, you could change the phenomena and create magic. Only this, that many scientists have got rather sophisticated and have realized that the word comes later than the event. That in the beginning wasn't the word. Of course, if you want to make new sense out of the phrase "in the beginning was the word," you have to go to Hinduism, where they have the idea that Vak, V-A-C in Sanskrit, or speech, is the basis of creation. But by this, they fundamentally mean vibration. As sound, see, is... They say that is, you see, if you listen to sound, go right down into it, fundamentally get what sound is all about, you understand the whole mystery of things. Because the whole mystery of things is vibrating energy. On and on. Simple as that. Life and death. Life is on, death is off. Have to have off, have on, have to have on, have off. It's what a relief. But they say that's the beginning. Now, but they also say, in another sense, on another level, that the roots of Sanskrit, say the root form, say the word Buddha, comes from the root form Bud, which means to know or to be awake. Bhava, which means becoming, comes from the root Bhu, which means to grow. So, karma, doing, comes from the root kri, to act. So they say, though, that the roots of Sanskrit are not simply the roots of a language, they're the roots of life. Because in another sense, altogether, you see, you create the world by the word. And this is something that we're not very conscious of. It's the way you think that determines your basic reactions to what happens. In the words of Shakespeare, there is nothing either good or ill, but thinking makes it so. Thinking is talking to yourself inside your head. And we, through this, build up all sorts of weird notions. We say, for example, well, one day you'll have to die. Have to. What's the emotional content of saying you'll have to die? It means it's going to be something imposed upon you against your will. So it's put in this passive mode, have to. You'll be compelled to die. But I can't be compelled to die unless I'm fighting it. You know, supposing I want to die. Supposing I commit suicide. Well, supposing we look at it all in another way and say, when I get a disease and die as a result of it, getting a disease is something I do, just as much as taking a walk. Only we've got our thoughts arranged so that we say, you ought not to get a disease. Even if it's just plain old age. Somehow, you ought not to do that. You ought to go on. You can't say, when death comes about, I laid me down with a will. Because we've got this hang-up about life being divided into two parts. Things we do, on the one hand, and things that happen to us on the other. And Buddhists say, what happens to you is your karma. And people don't readily understand that. They think my karma, something awful happened to me because of something bad I did in my last life. And therefore, I've got bad karma. Karma simply means your doing, your action. So that when something that happens to me is called, it means that it's your own doing. And if you recognize that it's your own doing, it's never bad karma. It's only bad karma if you refuse to admit that it's your own doing and merely blame someone or something else that it's something that happened to you. Now, I digressed a little because what I was getting at was the meaning of the law of nature. The laws of nature were taken over. The idea of the law of nature was taken over by Western science from this ancient magical notion of the word of God, the commandment of God, being the foundation for everything that happens in the world. But now, today, in Western 20th century science, there is an entirely new idea of the law of nature. The laws of nature are not things that exist in any real sense, which phenomena like the motion of stars or the behavior of animals and rocks, they're not phenomena which these things obey. The universe is doing its stuff. But because we have a certain kind of structure and brain, we want to accept it. And therefore, we find various ways of understanding the world by the principle of regularity. Now, what's that? Let's take a clock. A clock ticks regularly. But the world does not tick regularly. Inconveniently enough, the sun does not have the earth go round it in a neat 360 days. This has always irritated calendar makers. How to make a rational calendar? There is no solution, because the rotations of the earth upon its own axis do not neatly synchronize with its rotation around the sun. There's always something a little odd about it. So what we do is we superimpose over this rather odd elliptical path. Now that is also like putting a ruler along a piece of wood and saying this piece of wood can be cut to 12 inches. Now there are no inches in the wood. Inches are a method, a technique that human beings have invented for measuring things. And so we can cut out of a piece of cloth or a trunk of a tree so many feet. Well, originally, it's simply comparing the trunk with us by putting our feet over it one after another, saying it's so many feet long, or so many spans when you stretch out the hand. There's a fundamental idea of measurement, and the inch is, of course, one joint. I'm not sure how to do it. And so this comparison of man's body and its regular shape. You see, 10 fingers on either side. 5 fingers on either side makes 10. 5 toes on either side makes 10. And so by stretching ourselves out, as it were, against nature, we measured it. And the idea of measurement is the same idea as the idea of the law of nature. A law of nature is exactly the same kind of thing as a ruler, or a hammer, or a saw. It is a way of thinking which enables us to control our environment. By observing regularities, and then by making a calculus, which is a process really of betting. Will it be regular next time? And the odds are that it may be. If it's done it once this way, it's likely to do it again that way. So in this way, you predict eclipses of the sun. You predict the phases of the moon. You measure, you count it, how it went, how often it did it like this, how often it did it like that. And you say, well, it keeps on doing it. And you think, well, it's fascinating. It seems to obey me, because now I can tell you anytime it's going to come up. And the other people around haven't figured it out. They think I'm magic, because I'm going to say to them, the moon is going to change at such and such a time. So many days from now, it's going to have a different shape. And they say, my God, he was right. And they think I'm making it happen. because I can do that. And so I get a rather privileged position, because I could predict. But that's the basic idea, you see, of the law of nature. The law of nature is a human network, like the lines of celestial latitude and longitude. They don't exist in the heavens, but we project them on the sky in order to measure the positions of the stars, because the stars are scattered in a very confusing way. And just try and remember that mess and figure it out. But the clever ones, you see, just look at it through a network, a spherical network. You can number all the squares of the spherical network in accordance with the principles of the... It isn't really there, see. Then to help you a little further, pick out some of the big stars and see if they make a shape. You know, this is like doing a Rorschach test. And you see, oh, look, there's one over there that looks like a dipper. Or some people call it a plow. And there's one there that looks like a cross. There's one there that, by some extreme wangling, can be made to look like a virgin. And all these lines that join the constellations together are our ways of projecting a pattern upon this great and glorious confusion, so that we can remember it and chart it. But obviously, you can very well see that if you looked at this same pattern of stars from a completely different position in space, all those constellations and their roots vanish. You'd have to invent a new one, because there is nowhere where the stars are. It depends where you're looking from. So in this sense, then, man in nature, with his extraordinary symmetrical brain and its amazing complications, figures it out. And it's man who introduces the law into the world. He invents it. But in a way, invenire, to invent, is to discover. But what we discover, in a way, is not something that's out there. When we invent the laws of nature, we are discovering something about ourselves and our own passion for prediction, for regularity, for keeping things under control. Therefore, there has to be a law. So then, going back right now to the beginning of what I started to say, the question was then, what is the law of relationship between the atoms, between the fundamental billiard balls of which the world is composed? Well, you watch the game of billiards, and there's a cue, and it hits that ball, and then it moves over, and it hits that one, and then that hits that one, and then that hits that one. Has its behavior explained through its contact with the other billiard balls and the final contact with the cue. That's why it did it. And so this view of the world as something that happens by the mechanical processes of the law of cause and effect is one that is really basic to most people's common sense today, to most educated people. They would say it's very difficult to figure it all out because the whole thing is so complicated, but if you could know all the details involved in, say, the behavior or a single act of a human being, you would find that it was the ineluctable result of a series of bouncing balls against each other, fundamental atoms that predisposed the great final event to be just like that. So that theory of the relationship between the atoms is called, in technical language, catenary. C-A-T-E-N-A-R-Y, catenary. A catenary effect or a relationship between events is like, for example, we use another illustration, where you stand a row of bricks up, and you knock over the first one, and they all go and fall down. That is a catenary sequence. But it becomes increasingly obvious today to the physicist and to the biologist that that will not do as a sufficient description of how various events affect each other. And so there's another type of causal relationship altogether, which is called, instead of catenary, reticulate. R-E-T-I-C-U-L-A-T-E, reticulate, from the Latin rete, meaning a net relationship. Wherein, in other words, any given event is not simply ascribed to one or more previous events, but that the relationship between the past and the present, and between the present and the future, is all to be taken into consideration in understanding any one event. In other words, let's take one event I drop a ball and it bounces. That's, let's say, it's an event. I don't know how many events it really is, but we'll just say for the sake of argument that it's an event. Now, is it enough in describing this event to say, I let the ball go, it obeyed the law of gravity, it hit the floor, but because it was made of rubber and had some air inside it, it bounced and sort of slightly disobeyed gravity because it had an energy in it. But that's not enough. Because that the ball dropped, that I let it go, depended not merely upon a historical sequence of events that you can lay out in a string along a line of time. It depends also upon a present context. There must be a certain density of air. All kinds of things have to coexist with this in order for me to be there to drop the ball at all, much less manufacture a ball. So that what happens, but it must be seen in context. Context is terribly important because it isn't just when a thing happens that is important, it's where it happens. In what setting? So that you could say that my blood in my veins is in a certain setting. In a test tube, it's in a completely different setting. And in a test tube, my blood is not behaving in the way it behaves in my veins. Therefore, it's not the same thing. So, an individual person in one setting will behave in one way, in another setting in a completely different way. I remember when I was a child. I was one boy when I was at home with my parents. When I went to visit my uncle and aunt, I was someone different. When I was with my peers, I was someone quite different. Because I changed according to the setting, and children are very well aware of this. It's only as we go on that we keep having it drummed into our heads that we ought to have a consistent character. Also, we're influenced by novels, where the characters are supposed to be consistent. So you want to have a consistent character. You want to behave the same in all circumstances and towards all people. That merely means you become inflexible. So what things are, therefore, depend on the context in which they're found. On their network relationship to everything else that's going on. And one of the reasons for this, which is going to lead us to something more profound but much simpler, is, of course, that the whole notion of a thing or of an event in nature and of causal relationships between different things and different events is a purely abstract idea that does not really fit the facts of nature at all. In nature, in what this physical world that you feel when you hold your head or hold somebody's hand or just breathe, in that world, there are not any separate events. None whatever. Sure, there are all sorts of wiggles around here, all sorts of lines, all sorts of colors, all sorts of surfaces, all sorts of forms, but they're not separate. Because you see, you can't separate an inside, what you are inside your skin, from the outside of the skin. Because you can see that once if there weren't anything outside your skin, there'd be no inside. It takes the outside and the inside to create this situation. And in the simplest way, the situation that I call my body wouldn't be operating unless there was air around here to breathe. This physical phenomenon goes with the situation of there being air. Now, true, it wiggles about inside the air in a rather complicated way. And other people watching say, oh, something going on over there. You know, because the air you can't see and it remains rather constant except when there's a gale. And so you don't pay much attention to it because it's always around. What you pay attention to is what changes rather rapidly. And you say, well, that's a that. Say, hey, you say to someone, you see this change going on, some wiggle go, they say, what's that? See? And he knows what you mean by a that. A that means something on the end of a finger point. It's different, it's peculiar, see? And that's a that. So from that comes the idea of an event, or a thing, a that. But all these that's that are happening are here. And just as this whole situation in which we are at this moment is a complicated going withness. Now here then we get to the fundamental idea of this idea of going with. And from this we shall be able to construct the whole notion of network. And this is the idea I said at the beginning. It is extremely simple, but very difficult for people brought up to use Western languages to understand. Now, going with this, we could call it relativity. Relationship means simply, let me first of all put it in a very extreme form. Consider yourself, sitting here at this moment, being just exactly the sort of person you are. Maybe a little neurotic, maybe a little sick physically, maybe a little ashamed of yourself for some reason or other, or whatever. Just the way you are anyway, just like that, sitting here. That situation goes with, as back goes with front, the entire situation of the rest of the universe. Now, you as you are, exactly the way you are, and you really don't know what that is. You may have some opinions about it, but you really don't know. That goes with the way the whole of the rest of boundless being is arranged. Now, it isn't that the way the rest of boundless being is arranged is determining you to be the way you are. Or if it is that, if that's true, if it determines you, then we must also allow the other side of the picture that you determine it. It's your karma. You did it. But you say, no, but I didn't. I couldn't help it. You did me. And you can say, tis tisn't. My two children arguing until you realize that the argument was stupid. Because you and it are one event. It isn't a question of it controlling you or you controlling it. It's all one event. As Teilhard de Chardin said, the whole universe is the only true atom, the only truly indivisible whole. Human being, though, finds this difficult to understand because we're always telling each other, now you should different. Do you want to change? Don't be like that. Now listen, you're sick. Now I got a system. See, I got a system. I've got a real school here, a thing that's very important, and you should come and study with that. It may not be mine, it could be maybe some big sage or pundit that I know, and you should come around and study that. And I've thought about this for a long time, because I've heard every kind of opinion of all the sorts of things that I should do in order to get myself into shape. And I realized that if I followed this advice, I would spend my entire day doing exercises in preparation for life. I don't know when I'll ever get around to that. I would have my half an hour's yoga practice, 1 hour of zazen, so much physical exercises and so much memory practice, so much special diet preparation to be sure that I got proper food. And if I think this all through, oh my God, it's worth it. Then another school of thought will say, no, that's the thing, you're getting confused. Just do one thing, see? But then I say, now how am I going to choose which one I'm going to do? Well, he says, obviously this one's the best. And before you know where you are, you're sewed up by some religious fanatic. Now, please, I don't want to do this to you. Please don't think that I have any such recipe that I'm going to give you anything to do for 5 minutes every morning. I just am not. My whole notion would be to set you all free so that you only have to attend one seminar, never have to come back. That's the idea, really. Because I know that so far as my own livelihood is concerned, that there are always more people. No, I don't collect the following and just send them all away. There are plenty more people to fill the vacuum. But this is the whole idea that we're going to work on of a net. That you carefully, you will see that in every dewdrop there's the reflections of all the other dewdrops. So the way that dewdrop looks goes with the way all the other ones look. See? Particularly glimmer and so on. It's peculiar position, and everybody has to have it. And each individual dewdrop mutually depends on all the others. And that's the sort of scheme we're living. And it's a little bit of fractal logic at first, because we say, I can understand that I depend on this universe, because after all I need sunlight, air, water, the help of the society, and all that kind of thing. I needed a father and mother. Looking at it from the other point of view, I ask the question. Or another way of putting us down is to say, well, it was just a piece of a fluke in a mindless mechanism. See? We always managed not to find out that the relationship of the network is mutually running. That it depends on you just as much as you depend on it. Because you see, it's you. ingenious brain that, for example, turns vibrations of air into sound. You turn whatever this is doing into light. You turn whatever the air is doing into a sky called blue. There is only blue for a brain. It's like if you hit a drum, it's no skin, it'll make a noise. So it's the tight skin that evokes the noise out of a moving fist. No skin, no noise. So you, as the reflector, like the neutron reflects, you, as the so-called reflector of all that goes on, by the constitution of what kind of a reflector you are, you evoke what we call sun, moon, and stars, nebulae. The vast spaces, they're only vast in relation to you. They're not really vast. Only if you compare them with yourself, they're vast. They could be considered very tiny. Or equally, the space between two sides of a hair could be considered vast if you want to think about it that way. I mean, if you really want to go into a hair, there's a whole lot between one diameter of a hair, you know. And if you think about it a long time, you'll think it's what we call a vast subject. So, you know, for microscopy. Depends on the attitude. But the basic principle, the thing I really want to try and get across is this idea of going with the universe around you is your outside. As front goes with back, as the North Pole of magnet goes with South Pole. This principle of relationship governs everything. I won't say governs. I'm only using the rigid terms that we have to use out of our language. It underlies everything. And it's important to realize, and let me repeat this, that the great universe does not control the small individual any more than the small individual act controls the great universe. This is not a question of control. It is a question of more like dancing, of what happens, rather than what makes it happen. Things aren't made to happen. Only if you insist that a certain event is quite separate, then you can think of it being made to happen by the events that came for it. But if you realize they're all parts of one event, or different aspects, different phases of one event, then you see it happening and you don't see anything making it happen. Forcing that whole idea of things being made to happen, in other words, goes back to the idea of a universe that is based on a monarchical image, where the boss says, damn it, you do that, and the thing can't help it, and so it's made to happen. I'd say in Chinese, the universe is just not seen in that way. It's not seen as anything, it's not made to happen. It is what does happen, but it's all interrelated, and therefore there is a pattern to it, there is an order to it, the order of the net.